Today on the Roundhouse, we are going to hear the legendary voice of Pentrex. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Kozarek, and this is episode number 127 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we talk about everything in the industry and the hobby, you name it, and we discuss it. Today, we are talking to Dave Drui. The name itself might not be familiar, but if you grew up in the 90s or watched various VHS tapes of trains in the 90s, you're probably familiar with the name of Pentrex, known for their professional productions of showcasing railroads from around the world. The narrator of those videos, Dave Drui, is going to join us on the podcast to talk about what he actually knows about trains, how he became involved in these productions, and what he enjoys about being part of them. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank all of you who are helping to spread holiday cheer at the Roundhouse by being part of the Roundhouse crew. Go to patreon.com/the Roundhouse for as little as $1 a month. I really appreciate your support. Our guest today is the narrator of the Pentrex series of railfanning videos. He's a voice actor and announcer by trade. And once you hear this voice, if you were around in the 90s and listened to a Pentrex video, you will instantly recognize it. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Dave Drui.
Hi, Mickey. Oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong voice. Hey, it's good to talk to you, Nick.
Well, yes, it depends on which. I should have specified which voice you're selecting. I'm going.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Narrow it down for me. So the Pentrex voice.
Yes.
Got it. All right.
So talk a little bit about what your career has been outside of that body of work.
Well, I had this deep voice in junior high, and the teacher pointed to me and said, "Announcer." And I said, no, that's what you have to be. No. But he did say that, but I kept that in mind. And of course, growing up in the 60s, to be a disc jockey was like being a god. You know, they were as big in our minds as the acts they introduced. You know, in my mind, the local DJ that played rock and roll knew Paul McCartney, you know. I thought they were on the same level playing. So I strived to become a rock jock, but with this deep voice. They said you'd be more suitable for like an adult music station, like playing Frank Sinatra, Peggy Lee, that kind of stuff. So at 19, I ended up at one of those stations. And then later on, I wanted to really get into TV directing. And to do that, I got a job in radio at a place that had an AM, an FM, and a TV. And I did the all-night show, midnight to 6. Plus, I was nuts. I had another radio job. Well, that first radio job, I turned into the production director, the guy that does the commercials. There I worked noon to 2. Plus, I was pulling down a full-time load at the University of Washington. So I was getting sick a lot, sleeping 3 hours a night and trying to do my jobs there. But I did manage to weasel into the TV side at the CBS affiliate up here in Seattle. And I worked at various stations up here, some oldies rock stations. See, finally got to do rock, yay! But it was on an automated oldies rock station. But in 79, big change in my life, I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ and looked for him for guidance. And he really kind of led me to go to L.A. Now, why, I didn't know. I thought it was going to be ABC, CBS, NBC. I thought I was going to be Johnny Carson's TV director, but that didn't happen. I ended up at a very large church there, 10,000 members, and I directed video there. I mean, there I directed, Donna Summer did a gospel concert, and I directed that, and they made it available for sale, and lots of neat stuff. Unfortunately, most of the stuff I directed is in a in an attic there at the church, just wasting away. They never ever produced it to anything. But I finally got also after I quit the church, I got an opportunity to be at a network level radio. It was called the Financial Broadcasting Network, which was a startup, and it folded after a year. It ran out of finances, ironically. And then, not wanting to raise my kids in L.A., we were kind of in a shady area of town. We moved back home to Seattle, and that's where I've been ever since. I've been working in Christian radio for 28 years, for Salem Media Group. Plus doing stuff on the side. I'm always, available because I've got a home studio. That's where I'm talking to you from. And that's kind of how I've taken my career so far with 47 years, something like that.
Wow. When I was researching your background, I came across some of your work on Audible, that you narrated some audiobooks.
Oh yeah, man, those were gut-wrenching because they always had a deadline. They needed it to Monday, and they sent me the script on Friday. I hated those. I mean, the books were great. They're very enriching for people. I'm glad they enjoy them. But reading them, I would read and read and read until I made more mistakes than good takes, and then I'd go out and walk around the block and then come back in. I was in my, jammies and fuzzy house slippers the whole weekend, but I had to crank this thing out in 3 days. So they paid well, but like I said, given my druthers, I would not do those ever again. That was a lot of work.
It was just so funny to hear your voice, which I associate with narrating something about 3751 going over Cajon Pass, and you're talking about love and these other things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what I got a funny thing for you. I've been talking, like you said, about the love and how husbands should be wonderful to their wives and stuff. And my soundproof room here is really not a soundproof room. It's my laundry room that I've decked out with kind of foam rubber insulation. I did it myself, of course, all around the four corners, but it's not quite soundproof. And a lot of times I'd be doing these narrations about it's so good to be a loving parent. And my kids were outside the door here playing, and I'd interrupt my narration to say, "Honey, can you get those kids to shut up? I'm recording." And I come back in, God's love is so wonderful that you should really have patience. And anyway, that's my little aside there. But those books, audiobooks, were a lot of work. Some people love doing those. More power to them. I'd rather do a commercial and whack it out in 60 seconds and call it a day.
When did Pentrex first approach you about narrating one of their videos?
Okay, going back to that church I worked at, we also wanted some video cameras to videotape the surfaces, and Mike Clayton, the guy that started Pentrex, happened to be the Thompson television camera representative, and we bought our cameras from him. So he was in a lot, making sure they were installed correctly and working right for us. And he casually mentioned to my boss, he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about putting out railroad train videos, and I don't want them like the standard ones that just have natural sound on them. I want some narration so that somebody can explain what they're seeing on the screen." And my boss recommended me because I was producing the radio show for the church at the time. I met Mike. It was a love at first sight. No, I don't know. He started, using me for his narrations. And a lot of times, the way he'd do it, because he sat with me for the first couple reads because I got the words wrong. Like I'd say, "Here's the train consist coming down there." He'd go, no, stop. Consist, Dave. Huh? That's a train term. Just don't worry about it. Say it that way. But he'd come to my house, and I had a little, I didn't have room in the house anymore because we had kids. So I built actually it was a garden shed, and I insulated that out on the side of the house. Of course, I had to do this at night because I'm in L.A., for crying out loud. During the day it was excruciatingly hot. But he'd sit there with his little Betacam, and I'd plug my mic into his Betacam, and he'd sit there and coach me through a narration, and that's how the first Pentrex videos were born.
Given the amount of technical elements that you cover in a video, I imagine there had to be a lot of phonetic spellings and that type of thing, so you had a better sense of how to read these very odd terms if you're not from the world of railroading.
Yeah, it's funny. In the scripts, they'd spell out these train terms, which were pretty logical, some of them. But then the cities, the back east cities, like Norfolk, Virginia, I would say Norfolk, and they wouldn't give me any clues on that, so they had to come back with me with rewrites and saying, no, Dave, here's how you pronounce those cities right. So I was always pleading with them. Train stuff is fine. I got that. Tell me how to say the name of that city that the train is going through, and the Cajon Pass and all that kind of fun stuff. So that was where I needed to help.
As you got into these, what became the standard workflow for you of how you would approach a project?
It was, come and go. Sometimes I'd get a bunch of scripts in a row, and then I wouldn't hear from Mike for 6 months, and then another one would pop up. And so it was really freelance. I did my other work, but just occasionally I would say these things came in. Is that what you wanted me to explain there?
Yeah, and when you're doing the reads, are you ever seeing any of the footage, or are you just going solely off of what's on the paper?
Just what's on the paper. And they'll give me stuff like slow down here and milk this or do a big pause here. I have no idea why. And then later, if I happen to see the video, I'll go, oh, that's why they wanted me to do that. But no, it's just me reading a script in front of my computer here, and then later editing out. Believe me, there's lots of mistakes through these train things. I'll read through a paragraph maybe 3 or 4 times before I get it right. I'm thinking back in the day with Mike and my little garden shed, I did those pretty much all the way through. I mean, occasionally making a little bump here or there. But I've gotten a lot worse over the years. I mean, with editing, you probably know, something in my mind says, you could say that better. So I'll screw up, and sure enough, I can say it better, and then I'll do a pickup and then edit it later. But yeah, that's how it works for me.
Oh, yeah, it's so tempting when you can slice and dice audio with whatever program you're using to edit, to say to yourself, oh, it's okay, I can make that fix later. Sometimes it's the question of, do I want to get it right solely in one take and do 5 takes to do that, or just do the one and piece later?
Well, in my radio work back in the day, I could read a 60-second spot with a stopwatch over to the side of my eyeball. My peripheral vision could see how much time I got left, and I could do it in 60. Now, I'll plunge through, make 6, 7, 8, 9 mistakes, edit it, saying, oh, I need a little more time, rework the last sentence or two to make it longer or shorter. And I can't do that anymore. I can't read a 60 in a 60 anymore. I used to be able to, though.
As you did more of these, did you ever have experiences where people would stop you and go, hey, are you the Pentrex guy, if they heard you in some other context?
No, you're actually the first. I was always amused, though. There'd be these little blog arguments, and they'd argue whether I'm a true rail fan or not. And some people would say, sometimes it just sounds like he's reading a script. But other times, I think he's sincere. I think he really is a rail fan. And another guy would come on and say, no, I don't think so. I think he's a fake. He's just doing this for money. So my response would be, hey, when I get paid, the check clears, I am a rail fan. That's bottom line. Hey, you betch, baby.
But then do you say that to your audiobook fans or whatever niche markets you might be narrating for? Hey, I'm a this fan.
Well, yeah, I'd wish somebody would approach me like that. Actually, you're the first one that's ever interviewed me about my announcing career here, so I appreciate that, Nick. But no, that's never come up. I mean, sometimes, it was so funny, I got to say, my wife, I met at that church I worked at, and she wasn't a big, in awe of stars type of thing. We had a lot of stars coming to that church. It was right in the heart of the San Fernando Valley, so people like Pat Boone and Cesare Nova and Gavin MacLeod would go to that church. We'd leave them alone. They're just going to church on Sunday. But when she started dating me, her brother said, hey, isn't Dave that guy on the radio show for the church? And she'd go, no, he's not. He does something else there at the church. And her brother would say, are you sure? Yeah. And then she'd come to me and say, you know what my brother said? She said, you were that guy on the radio. And I said, well, that's me. That's what I do. Oh, so yeah, I surprised my wife that way. I still married her, by the way, even though I think it's good to marry an unfan, right? She married me for the right reasons, not because she was in awe of my voice or something.
As you said, she's the one who is supporting you when you're at home, when you're recording your lines in the laundry room, keeping the kids away for just that moment. It's good to have a team player.
Yeah, that's her job. She keeps the kids shut up. Very good, yeah. And you've kind of diminished everybody's image of me now, too. He records in his laundry room? What is that about?
Hey, you revealed
That's
that.
true.
I did
That's
not
true.
drag that out of you. You revealed
That's
that.
just. Hey, I've got another funny one for you. We have at the radio station I worked at, we have an imaging voice. The big voice guy at the top of the hour says, "You're listening to," and he's paid very, very well. He does work for CBS TV and CBS Radio and out of his house. And I asked him once because he sounds so doggone good. Well, his voice, for one thing, is just killer. But I said, "What's your studio look like?" Because I was kind of out redoing mine a little bit. He says, "Dave, I do have a studio in my house, but you know what I like to do? I go in my garage, I've got a Silverado truck. I go into that, and I hang the microphone from the visor, and I put my laptop there in my lap, and I read my scripts that way. It's the most comfortable." And I said, "No, Lonnie, my image of you has dropped 12 notches. You record in your truck, and you're doing these promos for CBS TV and stuff?" He says, "Yeah, it works. Who knows, right? I could be in my fuzzy house slippers and jammies right now, and you don't even know it, right?" Yeah, my boss keeps joking, "Yeah, you got a face for radio." So that's the oldest joke in the world I know, but that he loved telling me that.
So how many videos have you done for Pentrex? Do you have a count?
Oh, man, I have no clue. Over the years, gosh, since '84. And, of course, Mike Clayton sold the business a few years ago, and I thought, well, that's it. We're done that. But the new owners have picked up, and he started using me again. But you guess. You'd know better than I do.
Well, what I appreciate about the fact that you have that attitude is how you've lent your vocal talents to other railfan projects because you're recognized. The other context I'm thinking of in particular is when I heard you voice over one of Steve Laro's KNL Train Z videos.
Yeah. Yes. Aren't those amazing? I mean, it's all CG, right? And it looks real. Those are incredible to me, like the smoke plumes out of the steam engines. I'm thinking, is that real or is that Memorex, But yeah, I've expanded out there. Now, when I was working for Mike, he made it kind of an exclusive deal. I only did Pentrex. But I kind of didn't hear from him for years, and it's like, well, Mike, I got to eat. And these other train companies would contact me, and I'd finally said, yeah, I'll do your narrations too. I need food on the table. The funny thing is in my freelance work, I'm a big voice guy with a big D voice, right? I lose more jobs because they're not looking for that anymore. You watch most major TV commercials, and it's a quirky they're looking for, kind of a Casey Kasem, kind of a unusual voiced character, not the Gary Owens. You're probably too young to remember Laugh-In, but they used to have the guy with the cupped hand over his ear saying Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. But that kind of voice style is not in demand today. So I'm glad I'm at least still working for Pentrex.
Maybe it's because it became parody. So I think back to the late 80s and 90s when you'd have Don LaFontaine.
Oh, yeah. The king. In a world. I can't even say it like him. In a world. Nope, not even close.
Not too, maybe it's just the phone, but it sounded surprisingly close. But the thing is that was played for straight in the 90s. And then that eventually became parodied because it was so widely used. And I think I would guess that because of that parody, people now see it in that light. I feel like it's going to come back around, but I think the parody era needs to pass for people to be sincere.
I'll trust you on that one. I hope so.
I personally like the style. Because you've done all these videos now, do any of the terms stick with you? So when you're out in public and you see a train, you could actually identify it because you've probably identified it in one video or another?
Well, like when I see BNSF, I know what that stands for now, and I'll tell my kids. My youngest used to be thrilled with trains, and there's another funny one. I got an electric train, of course, a little dinky one. And this is not answering your question, by the way, at all. But once we were at a railroad crossing here near our home, and I thought, oh, good, a rail train's coming by. He's going to love this. So we parked within about 3 feet of the track, right near the drawbridge thing. And he freaked out. This huge thundering thing came roaring by, and I thought he'd be thrilled. He was scared to death. So, oops, chalk one up on Daddy there. Not a very good move.
Oh, no. Well,
yeah.
They'll come back around to it, perhaps.
Okay.
You never know.
Yeah, I hope so.
So
He'll come around.
So you recognize railroad names, but if you saw a particular locomotive, you're not sure you could necessarily identify that as a GEVO or...
No. Like I said, I read the scripts to just words, so I don't really see what I'm talking about. If I did, I probably would. But, I've become a huge steam fan. I mean, to me, diesels snore. I bow to those that like watching diesel videos, but they're boring to me. But those steam engines, especially in the cold, in the winter when they're plowing through snow or something, just something about them I love. So whenever I do a steam narration for Pentrex, I casually say, yeah, here's my bill, and could you send me a copy once you get that done? And I still have some of those. He'll still have some VHS Pentrex tapes that I'll bring out every once in a while, and I actually have a VHS player, a VCR that works.
See, this is what's so crazy. I remember when I was a kid of 3 or 4 listening to you narrate a home VHS tape about the Mount Rainier Scenic Railroad.
There we go.
And that's what's crazy. And I'm sure a lot of other listeners who are with us can kind of relate of, oh yeah, I grew up with that tape, or I listened to this tape and I remember him talking about this railroad. And the fact that you've been doing it for so long is impressive in and of itself.
Well, that's up to the guys that hire me, but thank you very much, yeah.
Besides a paycheck, what do you take away from the experience of narrating for these niche videos for this very niche audience?
What do I take away? Besides, like you say, besides the paycheck? Well, I told you about my kind of pseudo-love for steam. You're talking about when I read these terms, and now I'm more knowledgeable in what trains, where they were made at the Lima Locomotive Works in 1907 or whatever. That was another one. I kept saying Lima, and they said, no, like Lima Bean, Dave. Go back, re-record Lima Locomotive Works. So that was a goof on my part. I got a funny one for you. I was at the Tehachapi Loop. My father and mother-in-law used to live in Tehachapi, and we went to that marvelous loop. And it was one thing to see it on video. It's quite another to just be there in person and see that incredible thing in motion with the train serpentining around itself. Well, they have a little gift shop there. And, of course, they sell Pentrex videos. And I felt a little cocky that day, so I kind of sauntered up to the cashier and slyly told him, those videos over there, I'm the narrator. I'm the Pentrex narrator. And he looked at me for a second and said, you want to buy something or not? And I realized I wasn't impressing this guy. I said, never mind, and went about my business. But that was one point where I kind of got my ego squashed. He didn't care.
Since we don't get to see you, the trains are the celebrities, good, bad, or otherwise.
There you go.
And I think that's the way with a lot of these productions, is that you have, especially in the day and age of YouTube, where so many other people can kind of be their Pentrex at home production type thing. YouTube's made it so much easier to disseminate railfan videos. It's still about how good do you showcase the train. Yes, you may be this person, but at the end of the day, you'd better know what you're doing when you're behind the camera. People aren't going to necessarily have that interest, or narrating it, or whatever the case may be.
Well, I'm amazed at the patience of these videographers that will wait for hours for a photo run by. It's like, gosh, and then maybe the train backs up and they do it again. But just the patience of these guys to get just the right shots, and oops, we blew that one. Let's get in our car and speed ahead so maybe we can catch another one. That just amazes me. It's not like you can do another take. It's like, could you make that train back up, please? I didn't have the lens cap up. Hey, I got a nuts story for you. I was in L.A. when I moved down there. Of course, I didn't work. I didn't have any connections. But I got a job as an extra on a made-for-TV movie called Twirl. If baton twirling fans will be very aware of that, because it's kind of a cult following with that. But we had this huge shoot. I was part of a marching band. That was my job. Huge shoot in this outdoor stadium there with hundreds of extras, and the baton twirlers were doing their thing. We we filmed a whole day of shooting, and at the end they got on the bullhorn and said, "Okay, we'll need you all back tomorrow, same time. We'll pick it up then." And we asked around and said, "What the heck was that? We shot a whole day of shooting," and they said they left the lens cap on. I said, "What? This is L.A. This is big time." Well, I found out all that means is they make big time mistakes. The whole day was shot because the focus puller, whatever the guy is who's supposed to set the lens, didn't pop the lens cap off. We had to shoot the whole thing the next day. Huge, thousands of dollars in overruns, but I just thought, oh man, my whole image of Hollywood has gone, again, diminished 12 notches.
Makes the rest of us feel like, okay, it's an honest mistake if we forget to.
Yeah, they can do that. I can do that.
Yes.
Right.
And sometimes we need that level
man.
of empowerment. Exactly. What have been some of your other dream projects that you've done, maybe outside of train stuff? And what are some that you would like to do in the future?
Oh, okay. Well, I'd like to be NBC's, imaging announcer. You're watching the national, whatever. Yeah, in my dreams, right? While I was in L.A., I happened to work at a radio station that the previous crew had been totally. I should tell you that story. I mean, I moved down to L.A. and for 2 years I didn't work, and of course I hadn't met Mike Clayton yet or anything. I was down to my last $25 when I scored a job at a Christian radio station that I had applied at 3-4 times before, and they said no. This time they hired me. Well, it turns out they had just changed format to all talk from music, and they needed upper management. Well, I was thrilled to just be making commercials again. But in about a month, they made me the station manager. And I'm thinking I couldn't even manage my checkbook, let alone manage a full radio station. Anyway, I did that for 2 years. But the sales manager, who had been axed because of the old format that didn't work, had a thing called the Pat Boone Show. It's good old Pat, just disc jockeying records for an hour. And it went national. It's funny. It even got into at the time, Russia, would not allow anything American inside its borders until the wall came down, I guess you say. But they loved, the Billy Graham Crusade. Forget it. No, we're not going to allow that. But Pat Boone, yeah, come on in. We'll air that program. So anyway, this guy hired me to be Pat Boone's announcer. And you think, lavish studios and everything. No, we went to Pat's house in Beverly Hills, and he had one microphone, and he had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and we'd record his tracks in the morning. We'd go into the studio at night, insert the records and the commercials, and that was how easy it was to produce the Pat Boone Show. But that lasted for 6 years. That was a pretty nice gig.
And with that concludes our interview with Dave Drui. I apologize for the abrupt cutoff to the end of this interview, but a couple of the files didn't get saved properly and sent over. So that is all we have of Dave's interview. But hopefully you learned a lot about Pentrex and the work that he does in voicing these very technical, very niche videos. And I really appreciate Dave for coming on the podcast.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, we were talking to Art Ellis, a founding member of the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, a man who lived in Pittsburgh for a number of years, worked for Pittsburgh Railways, and had so many fascinating stories to share about trolleys and interurbans, which led to the obvious question, what's your favorite piece of trolley or interurban history? A lot of you responded with some really cool and obscure lines because, man, there never seemed to be a shortage of interurban railways if you look back far enough. From NS Steampunk on Twitter, for interurban, the Columbus, Delaware, and Marion Interurban Railway with their special first-class lounge seating. A portion survives today at the Ohio Railway Museum where I volunteer. For streetcars, the system that ran out of Lancaster, Ohio, not too far from where I live. On Facebook, Patrick Wilkinson writes, the Golden Chariots of Montreal, specifically Montreal Tramways Car 4, which I have operated several times over the year now. Chris McGagan writes, the LENN, the Lake Erie and Northern, ran through my town, and I'm working with the group to try to save and restore one of its only remaining stations. Lastly, Jimmy Lambert writes, my personal favorite is the one that was local to me, the Washington and Old Dominion. It started life as an attempt to compete with the Baltimore and Ohio, but those dreams never materialized and the line was absorbed as a branch of the Southern Railway before being transferred to the Great Falls and Old Dominion trolley line, forming the Washington and Old Dominion. The power lines came down prior to World War II, but the railroad soldiered on into the 60s before finally going belly up. It strikes me that one of the things that often brings interest in these otherwise obscure rail lines is just how local they truly were and how intertwined they are in our hometown histories. That's a good point, Jimmy. I mean, there's a number of That's a good point, Jimmy. And there's a number of interurban lines I've come to fall in love with over the years because there's something so personal and down to earth about them. They really were part of their communities. Your question of the day for this episode is, What's one of your favorite railfan VHS tapes? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. As of recording this, 2022 is coming to a close, and we're coming up on 2023. I hope that you've had a great holiday season and that the new year brings prosperity, joy, and most importantly, trains. Remember, as always, that the Roundhouse is our house.